Today we're going to talk about the identity crisis. Now we finished off on the identity of the seed, but I like to dig a little bit more on the identity crisis that we face in today. Our identity is always questioned, even in Jesus' time. We are questioned about our identity, as well as who we belong to. That is, even if it is not us verbally, but somehow, as we move through the day, through the week, through the year, in our lives, we are questioned about who do we belong to, where do we belong, how we belong. Now, if you don't know who you are, where you belong, and how you belong, guess what you will have? You will have an identity crisis. Because you will belong to everyone, you will belong everywhere, you belong anyhow. Jesus didn't have Facebook, Jesus didn't have Twitter, he didn't have WhatsApp, he didn't have all that. But he had the same things. He had the 12, in fact in the 12 he had the 2, and then he had the 3, and then he had the 1, and then he had the 70, and then he had the 4,000, and then he had the 5,000. All these were followers of some sort. So when he's asking, who do people I, the Son of Man, am? It's an identity question. So when you look out there, we are here. It's an identity issue. Where do you go to church? BCC. Oh, BCC. Oh, yes, I belong. I'm identified. Now, if you don't have your identity, guess what? You will pick up your identity from me. Wrong move. We have a serious problem. There is massive polarization in our country. Why? It's an identity question. There is massive tribalism in our country. Why? There is an identity crisis. There is massive racism in our country. Why? It's because there's an identity crisis. How do you even, as a child of God, want to be identified by the color of your skin? I refuse. In heaven, there's no black and white. So I refuse to be marginalized, minimized, or made superior because of the color of my skin. If one does not know the identity of the seed that you are, that you will be, that you are becoming, it will cause you to have chronic identity crisis. That's why we talk about the incorruptible seed. When we talk about the incorruptible seed, we are saying there is a seed that you are, that God made you to be, that is born of the Spirit of God, that should wipe out any sort of identity crisis in you. When one loses their godly identity, they always fall into idolatry. So when you lose your identity, you choose another I, which is idolatry. And idolatry, because there is always a vacuum in our hearts that if not filled by God himself, you will, or we will fill it with something we will worship. There is that vacuum in us that always seeks to worship. So if we don't fill it with God to worship him, we will then fill it with things that we will worship. This is the problem. Even when we go to homosexuality, there is no disease called homosexuality. There is no gene that is called homosexuality. It is an identity issue where people are saying, well, I feel this way. Did God really say that you can only be a man? Yes! If you're a man, you're a man. If you're a woman, you're a woman. They're already in the image of God, and yet the devil was persuading them to be gods unto themselves. So he was now asking them, you can actually worship yourself this time round. Which they did. There was nothing new in knowing good and evil, because they were created in God's image. Satan was recruiting Adam and Eve to his kingdom, which was competing with the kingdom of God. Now, identity idolatry, all of humanity can be divided into two categories. Let me just say that. Those who worship the Creator and those who worship the creation or the created things. Simply put, when you walk into a crowd, there are two groups of people. Those who worship the Creator of heaven and earth, Yahweh, Jehovah, Jesus, the Son of God. Those are in one category. There is another category, those who worship created things. Jewelry, furniture, and many more items here. There are three main characteristics of the phenomenon of consumerism today. The first about consumers is that it isn't just a behavior. It is, in Christian terms, a world view that tells us who we are. If possessions define your identity, then the brand name of your clothes and the maker of your car are vital. The second aspect of consumer is also driven by the desire to gain status and prestige with one's peers through conspicuous consumption. The places you go, the things you do must be conspicuous. You must be identifiable by your idolatry tendencies. Social prestige is connected with wealth, and we demonstrate our wealth by flaunting it and showing it off. Naked we came, naked we shall go. This balance sheet that we are trying to deal with remains here. And it is the created, it's the creature. Why don't we focus in the creator who will give us life everlasting? And that is where our identity needs to be locked into. Products are not simply valued for their usefulness, but rather play a central role in cultivation and maintenance of our identity. This is a powerful explanation for why consumer goods are so much more than objects we use. They are things for which we will fight and sometimes even kill. Now, the level of anger, upset, emotion you show on these items tells you the level of idolatry you have on the same things. End of story. So if the passion, the anger, the emotions, the intentions, the intensity you show on these items that kind of define who you are. You are at the same level of intensity into idolatry. You have now begun to replace the creator with the creature. And at that point, you are in deep idolatry. God rules it out. He says, I am a jealous God. I do not share my glory with anyone else. That causes a repulsion and an abomination in the nostrils of God, because he does not want to be compared with a pair of shoes. He does not want to be compared with a jacket or a hairstyle or a dress. He does not want to be compared with a cell phone. This is an iPhone 7, by the way. He does not want to be compared with a cell phone. He does not want to be compared with a car. These are all perishables. We have an incorruptible God. We have an infallible God who has decided to stay and to live in our hearts and give us the incorruptible seed. Why have we taken that which corrupts, that which dies, that which is fallible, and trying to replace it with the incorruptible, with the immortal, with the one that is from everlasting to everlasting, the Alpha and the Omega? Let's be weary that, yes, we can have all these things, but freely we have been given and freely we must release them. And that we must count them as dung, and forgetting all these things and pushing them behind and pressing on to the mark of the high calling, who he has called us to be, that we may know him, the power of his resurrection, the fellowship of sharing in his suffering, so that somehow we may attain the resurrection from the dead. Friends, let's be careful of idolatry.